So 2020 was kind of, what? At least I had good old video games to fall back on. In fact, directly because of the events of last year, I had a lot more time on my hands to play a bunch of cool stuff. So I'd like to talk about some of my favorite games that I played in 2020. It's not a top 10 of games that exclusively came out last year or anything, it's more a list of games I had the most fun with. So it's a hodgepodge of stuff, including the new, the old, and new ways to play the old. And while I played a ton of games that you'd consider quote-unquote better than a lot of what I'm going to show here, I suppose I also wanted this to exist as a spotlight for a couple of games that you might have missed or forgot about. So let's say we get right into giving thanks to the games that helped curb the impending and ever-approaching sense of existential dread in the year that was. Timesplitters might be my favorite first-person shooter series of the 6th console generation. It was just so different from the sea of military shooters at the time. Its cheeky personality and its story based around leaping through time gave itself so many opportunities for creative, charismatic and varied level design. But while I have fond memories of Timesplitters 2 and Future Perfect, returning to them today has left a lot to be desired, as the graphics and controls have noticeably aged. So imagine my excitement upon hearing that Timesplitters 2 received a fan-created HD texture pack, and that both games could now be played using mouse and keyboard. And after checking them out, I have to say, it's almost as if this is the way these games were meant to be played. It helps that the game underneath the shooting is just as fun as I remember it. The Timesplitters series just has so much charisma, from its characters, dialogue and cutscenes, to its missions and enemies within the levels. It's cheesy and tropey in the best way possible. As opposed to being historically accurate portrayals of these eras, Timesplitters instead pays homage to the pop culture about them. For example, you could find yourself in the Wild West, busting a wanted criminal out of jail by creating a gunpowder trail, setting off an explosion using a conveniently placed nearby cart of explosives. Or you might be sneaking through the nighttime streets of a bustling Neo-Tokyo, following an adversary while staying out of the watchful eye of the city's police. It's like every level is its own self-contained adventure, and it becomes so much fun leaping through those time portals in anticipation of what they'll throw at you next. The easiest of recommendations for anyone willing to put in the legwork to get these running, as I guarantee it'll have you falling in love with this classic duo of FPS games all over again. On the topic of first-person shooters that aim to parody its cheesy and tropey source material, I can't believe that works as a segue, another game I had a blast with this year was on the Nintendo Wii with the House of the Dead: Overkill.
Tonight, these unlikely allies will confront terror most foul in the blood-soaked halls of Papa's Palace of Pain.
So I have a lot of nostalgia for arcade rail shooters and shooting gallery games. Despite their simplicity, I have vivid memories of loitering around my local cinema's lobby, pumping all of my coins into the House of the Dead, Time Crisis, and Point Blank. Even by just looking at some gameplay here, I swear I can still smell that confusing concoction of buttered popcorn and slushy-caked cinema carpet that hasn't been vacuumed since 2003. However, these days the genre has all but disappeared, as like many arcade games before it, it unfortunately never quite found that same success as it transitioned to home consoles, which sucks, because not only did it seem like the Wii was primed to be the savior that carried on the legacy of that arcade-style light gun rail shooter, as its hardware complemented those games' designs perfectly, but also because I think these still exist as some of the most entertaining, turn your brain off, don't ask questions and just make the things explode types of video games that the medium has to offer. Overkill specifically is this ridiculous and pulpy homage to 70s grindhouse and exploitation cinema. It's gory, it's vulgar, it's tasteless, and it's a great time. There's such a tangible sense of thought and care here, as everything from the characters' designs to level locations to the cheesy dialogue was crafted with the intention of recreating the feeling of viewing its source material. And while that mostly means faithful recreations of those films' visual styles, complete with grainy and flickering film reel overlays and boisterous title cards, it also aspires to emulate those films' content, meaning it doesn't shy away from everything that the genre was known for. So I feel like I have an obligation here to let let you know that Overkill will not be for everyone, as it deliberately aims for an offensive, crass style of humor. If you're not up for those pee-pee poo-poo jokes, give this one a skip, as Overkill is an all-out assault of blatantly objectionable material. What I do have a much easier time recommending to everyone though, is this game's fantastic soundtrack. Made up of 70s-inspired energetic funk, rock, pop and disco, the soundtrack to the House of the Dead Overkill is the kind of music that wouldn't seem out of place in a Tarantino film. There's a gleeful percussion, blaring horns, grooving bass lines and slick guitar riffs that create this fun, dangerous kind of energy that you just don't hear in video games. Rather than trying to build a spooky atmosphere, the music acts more like what you'd imagine would be playing on the characters' iPods as they behead the undead. On the shooting, Overkill also remains faithful to its arcade origins due to the precision of the Wii Remote's motion controls. In fact, when the Wiimote is slotted into one of those plastic gun attachments, it becomes what is probably the most faithful recreation of that old arcade experience that you can have in your home. Now, of course, the footage you're looking at here is the Director's Cut remaster that was ported into the PC and PS3, but I still think that the game is best experienced on the Nintendo Wii. Because not only do I consider pointing plastic at the screen to be at the core of what makes this genre so fun, but if anything, completely unintentionally, I also think the Wii's less powerful hardware actually gives the game a more effective, grainy, muggy look that ends up feeling a bit more faithful to the source material. So should you ever get the hankering to return to the days of losing track of hours within an arcade, by all means pick up the House of the Dead Overkill. Speaking of old video game genres that arguably should have had a second wind on the Wii, Captain Rainbow is a 2008 Japan exclusive point-and-click adventure game. Another flawless segue, how do I keep doing it? Captain Rainbow was a star of the silver screen, his superhero television show adored by children everywhere. Alas, the limelight shifts at a blistering pace as the show was eventually surpassed in popularity. The name Captain Rainbow now existing solely as a forgotten memory for children who have long since grown up. The man behind the mask, Nick, now on a journey to Mimmin Island, a place home to unimaginable power that is said to grant someone a single wish, as he dreams of a return to stardom. Only, as Nick arrives, he realizes he's merely one of many hopefuls, as Mimmin Island has become inhabited by long-forgotten Nintendo characters, each of which equally desperate to realize their dreams, as not only will having them granted mean a better life and internal fulfillment, but it's also their only means of escape from the island. A goal made a little bit harder, standing in the community's way, are none other than those dastardly shadows. The physical embodiments of the spite, jealousy and resentment from those who never saw their dreams come to fruition. Nick now lending a hand as Captain Rainbow, he seeks to uncover the secrets behind the island and the strange creatures that inhabit it to help make everyone's dreams a reality. As well as existing as a delightful story about legacy, the loss of identity, and the resilient pursuit of your dreams, Captain Rainbow is also a very strange game, which is sort of par for the course when you realize the team that made this was none other than Skip Limited. For the uninitiated, Skip was a tiny Japanese development team whose games are kind of like a metronome, in that their stories forever swing between heartwarming and heartbreaking. My favorite of which being Chibi Robo, which I actually made a video on in 2020. And much like Chibi Robo's gameplay that involves traversing a living space, assisting characters with their deep-rooted personal issues, whose actions are dictated by a day-night cycle, Captain Rainbow is also made up of a backbone that is equal parts charming and grim. As Captain Rainbow is just so endearing, as Nick remains mute, only answering villagers' questions with a simple thumbs up or down, and how in superhero form, he can't help but pose when getting his photo taken, even when said photo is for evidence at a potential crime scene. His disposition and desire to help others who aren't great at life without any judgment is undeniably wholesome. Whether it's stumbling across Little Mac, helping him return to fighting form after letting himself go, or assisting Takamaru in getting over his paralyzing fear of women, or improving Birdo's innocence for a crime she swears she didn't commit, strolling through Mimmin Island is similar to that of Animal Crossing, only if there was no economy and all of the villagers were deeply unhappy. I mean, this island and the characters within it couldn't be more cartoonish, but it's their ever relatable desires and relationships as they navigate this isolated tropical society that gives Captain Rainbow a tangible sense of reality. As while you might spend your time in this game just hanging out, practicing golf, or playing volleyball, it also has this beautifully profound subtext that gives insight into this very human struggle of pursuing your dreams and ultimately happiness. It's also worth noting here just how gorgeous this game looks, with a striking cel-shaded art style that simply hasn't aged. I mean, some of my favorite parts of this game was when I decided to stop at one of the park benches so I could just take the time to admire the landscape. Purely existing in Mimin Island is such a joy, so I consider it such a shame that Captain Rainbow was never officially ported over to the West. And while we'll never know for sure why that was, I was able to play Captain Rainbow due to an English translation patch created by dedicated fans Mark Ars and Kirameki Translations. Unfortunately, the fan patch wasn't 100% complete, but with the assistance of a walkthrough online written by Jason Muir, I was able to see credits roll, and consider myself very grateful to have done so. Thanks to those guys, I was able to finally play what was easily one of the most bizarre, hilarious, and endearing games I played last year. Now, I actually found this game because in 2020 I'd been on somewhat of a love-de-lick kick, as the studio's 1997 magnum opus Moon was finally translated officially, released on the Switch eShop mid-year. Skip Limited being merely one of many talented studios that trickled down from the company's brief yet important existence. So I'm glad I decided to do my homework here because it brought a ton of interesting games and teams to my attention, one of which being Yoshiro Kimura's Onion Games and their title, Dandy Dungeon: Legend of the Brave Yamada. A game about a game, Dandy Dungeon is a window into the life of the 30-something loser Yamada, who one day decides to simply stop going to work to finally pursue his dream of developing his own video game, coming to the conclusion that if he finishes it, he'll win the affection of Maria, who's just moved in down the hall. However, his old employers, Empire Games, are so furious with Yamada's actions and general lifestyle that they decide to punish him by hacking his video game, meaning you must now debug and playtest Yamada's game so it can be completed, thwarting off the enemies placed by Empire Games so that Yamada can continue to implement new features. Yamada's game takes the form of a very simple grid-based roguelike, with navigation through the dungeons acting as a light puzzle. While it's admittedly very simple from a gameplay perspective, it's the presentation here that really shines, as Yamada uses his real-life experiences and feelings to craft his game. Everything he cares about or has feelings towards is somehow woven into this sub-game, as Maria takes the form of a princess and his bosses from his job reimagined as sinister video game bosses. It was really cute to see what is essentially an outlet and escape for a character that admittedly doesn't have a lot going for them. Not only does it make Yamada super relatable and endearing, but it's also this nice little example of how your art will always exist as a reflection of yourself at a specific point in time, even if you try otherwise, and I think that's really cool. As beyond Yamada the character, Dandy Dungeon is essentially the story of Yoshiro Kimura. It was in his older years that he too decided to take a sabbatical from the games industry due to the immense stress and pressure he was under, before returning years later to create his own, much smaller indie studio, meaning Dandy Dungeon exists as this uncomfortably intimate and personal insight into the mind of a man who's clearly been burned by an industry that he cares so much for. But to discuss where Dandy Dungeon really shines as a video game, I would be a fool not to discuss this game's compelling sense of progression. As you conquer these dungeons, you gain more loot and gold, which can be sold or upgraded for better equipment, which allows you to venture further the next run, and thus the ever-addictive gameplay loop continues. But as well as that solid roguelike foundation, Dandy Dungeon also has this entirely unexpected emotional progression, as when you grow and become more capable within the video game, so does Yamada as a person outside of it. And this is one of my favorite kinds of stories, when someone who is down on their luck, incapable, or just an outright bad person grows over the course of a story to become someone better. I'm sure you've noticed how bizarre this game is. I mean, if you thought Captain Rainbow was weird, but the humor here almost takes a backseat to that feeling of pride and satisfaction gained from watching Yamada improve his life. An easy recommendation for someone who's into roguelikes and that addictive gameplay loop, getting that sweet dopamine hit from watching the numbers go up. On the topic of the Nintendo Switch, that was probably the console that got the most attention from me in isolation last year. And another game on it I was thoroughly engrossed by was Vampire the Masquerade: Shadows of New York. Oh my golly gosh, that's right folks, a game released in 2020. For a little background, I'm a huge fan of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, so much so that I also made a video on it way back when, and while I anxiously await for its sequel to arrive, which doesn't look to be doing too hot right now, I decided to quench my thirst for more of that campy vampire goodness by playing the pair of Vampire the Masquerade visual novels created by Polish indie developers Draw Distance. Coteries of New York from 2019 was a great introduction for those unfamiliar with the World of Darkness lore, detailing the terrifying first few nights of a newly turned vampire, but it was 2020's standalone expansion, Shadows of New York, that really gripped me. Mostly because Shadows trims the fat, getting the vampire origin story out of the way quickly so it can time skip straight to the juicy part, as you're thrown deep into the world of vampire politics. Surprisingly, the story here is a twist on your classic whodunit, presenting a locked room murder mystery as ex-journalist now vampire Julia must interrogate some of the city's most prominent undead figures to uncover this conspiracy. It's a story that I couldn't help but be drawn into, as Shadows establishes such a sleazy, brooding atmosphere. It's due in part to the dynamic lighting and moving backgrounds that subtly but effectively elevate the visual novel to become a more immersive experience, but the defining asset of Shadow's atmosphere has to be its soundtrack. I don't think I've ever characterized the tune as conspiratorial before, but that's perhaps the best descriptor for this game's music. It's like a pulsing, gothic nightmare, an anxiety-inducing blend of industrial and orchestral noise that makes you feel like you're about to uncover something about someone that you were really better off not knowing. It's an experience that's made even more engrossing as the main character is incredibly well written and defined. Julia carries with her a cynicism and spite for everything, and for good reason. Now trapped juggling both this new life as a vampire caught within a political system fraught with lies and deceit, and a spiraling relationship with her girlfriend as they struggle to compromise this new nocturnal lifestyle. Julia's internal monologue specifically is fantastic and gives insight into the mind of a very complex and broken person. As for the gameplay, I also enjoyed how the game has multiple key moments which will determine Julia's personality traits, the amalgamation of these directly affecting how Julia will act within the game's ending. So come the moment where you would usually make that all-important decision when prompted with two dialogue options, here Julia will instead decide for you based off of her personality traits, turning what is often an entirely reactive decision into a proactive one that better aligns with the character's disposition. Also, I don't think you need to have previously engaged with any other Vampire the Masquerade material to be able to enjoy this. As for those unfamiliar with the lore, Shadows features the ability to consult a dictionary of lingo should you come across one of the many terms commonly used in the World of Darkness. Some quick studying will bring you right up to speed with all things vampire clans, alliances, rivalries, and even vampire slurs. Overall, I'm glad I decided to check these out, as the games gave me that vampiric feel that I needed as I continue to watch the development of Bloodlines 2 from the shadows. Finally, I also wanted to mention how I spent a lot of 2020 playing fighting games. It's a game genre that I only ever tinkered with, but having watched the pro scenes for various games for a few years now, I thought Lockdown was as good a time as any to properly submerge myself in the genre. And while I had a lot of fun with games like King of Fighters 13, Third Strike, and Dragon Ball FighterZ, one that I wanted to highlight here was the excellent Persona 4 Arena, Ultimax. So sit down and let me preach here for a second as I consider the lads over at Arc System Works to be producing what is the gold standard of the genre. And when I heard that their thought, care, and expertise was going to be married with the rich and robust world of the Persona series, I expected nothing less than fighting game perfection. And while I'm certainly not an authority on the genre, I'd say that Ultimax is pretty damn close. From the second a match kicks off, Ultimax grabs you by the hair. It is thrilling. The fights have this blistering sense of speed speed and style as the momentum never lets up. It almost feels unnatural to stop in place because every move feels effortless yet immensely satisfying to perform. Whether you're leaping across the stage to lay in a flurry of punches in a sequence that feels like it was pulled straight out of Dragon Ball Z, or in performing a super that creates a sensory overload, it's the flawless integration of the Persona's abilities from turn-based JRPGs into real-time 2D combat that makes this game really special. See, the measuring stick I use when gathering thoughts on a new fighting game is if each character on the roster feels different from the last, almost as if when I select them, it's now like I'm playing an entirely different game. And in Ultimax, that's certainly the case. From ranged snipers who keep their distance to dwindle down their opponent's health taking pot shots, to gap-closing grapplers who will crush anyone unfortunate enough to be standing in their way, to swift and nimble healers who let their personas do the majority of fighting for them, each game is a contest of clashing styles and approaches, and figuring out how to overcome your character's weakness while exploiting your opponents is at the heart of the fun. Now, let me tell you here that I am garbage at this game, and if it looks like I'm doing anything even remotely impressive here, know that I was just mashing buttons. But even for someone as talentless as myself, I assure you that I have still participated in some of the most tense, exciting, and white-knuckle matches in any fighting game I've ever played here. I mean, even in victories against the AI, I would be leaping off of my couch, punching the air in celebration. I'm sure you've also noticed how the game's presentation just oozes style. The slick transitions between battles will never not get me hyped up to play another round, and the in-game sprites and animations remain some of the most gorgeous of any recent fighting game, with a liveliness and energy so striking and expressive that I think even someone with zero knowledge of the Persona series can develop a loose idea of who these characters are. But for those who are fans of the Persona series, there's also a lot to bathe in here. From the crossover story that creates little endearing moments of interaction between beloved characters who never met in the original games, to music that boasts the best of the legendary P3 and P4 soundtracks, there's just a lot to sink your teeth into if you're hungry for more Persona content. Unfortunately, the PlayStation 3 version of the game is a bit on the pricier side these days, which is why you've been watching the Japanese version here, as I was lucky enough to pick up a physical copy on the cheap when I was over there on holiday in late 2019. Thankfully, it has the option to switch the voice acting over to the fantastic English dub, so I was still able to play the story to completion.
Are putting kind of a damper on the urgency of this situation.
So while I'm not looking to go pro or anything, I could definitely see this game on regular rotation during a game night with friends, and I can't wait to continue my deep dive into the fighting game genre. Overall, I got around to playing a lot of video games in 2020, and I struggle to express just how valuable I found some of these experiences here. Video games offered me a cozy comfort and escape that I desperately needed in the hellscape that was last year. So, thank you, video games, and I'd also like to thank you. 2020 was a lot of things, but it was also a big year for the channel, and I made some videos I'm weirdly proud of. So a big thank you to anyone who has ever left a rating or comment or subscribed. It genuinely means a lot to have your support. Anyway, that's all from me. Love you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.